Net Wealth Investments Limited is licensed to provide general advice. Our podcasts are not tailored to any one financial situation and may contain views of our presenters which may not align with Net Wealth's. The guest's organisation and Net Wealth have an arrangement for their financial products to be available for investment through the Net Wealth platforms, and Net Wealth may receive fees from the guest. More information about Net Wealth can be found on our website, including our financial services guide and disclosure documents. Please seek professional advice before acting.
That's my basic mantra. Investing generally is not complicated.
They wanted to support us, but they also wanted to see us succeed before they really gave us that support.
So we have a very, very strong footprint around about the 12% mark of the professional advisors in the industry today.
I think we can probably do a little bit of work as advisors and advice firms to just sort of simplify things and take a step back, unpack it all.
Hi, and welcome to Between Meetings with Matt Heiner. In this podcast series, NetWealth's CEO and Managing Director chats to industry leaders and innovators with local and global expertise. They discuss the latest technologies, business models, and demographic changes, as well as leadership lessons and trends that are impacting financial services. We hope you enjoy their unique insights.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of Between Meetings. I'm absolutely delighted, as always, to introduce our guest today, Danni Grande, one of the preeminent tech experts in our industry. So looking forward to this chat and hearing about what's happening out there in advice land.
Thanks for having me, Matt. I'm very excited to be here and have a chat to you about all things tech.
Indeed. Now, as regular listeners would know, I tend to spend quite a bit of time sort of delving into people's backgrounds, but I'm also equally excited to hear about what you're seeing in the marketplace at the moment. But for those that haven't had the opportunity to hear from you at a conference or work with you, do you want to just give a bit overview of your background, but also Finura and what you're doing in the industry?
So I'm head of IFA consulting at Finura Group. So we are a technology consulting services company. So we're product agnostic. We're not aligned to any of the technology providers. So I spend my day entrenched in advice firms, either going through technology reviews or working with them to implement and adopt that technology change in a meaningful way. So I'm really lucky I get to work with our clients for extended periods of time and, sort of feel like I get to be a bit part of the team there, which is great. And obviously technology, as all of your listeners will be aware, is such a hot topic at the moment. So it's great to be kind of involved in that and really hope that we're making some meaningful change out there.
I know one of the things that you're very passionate about when talking about technology is actually making sure that you put people first and think about their capabilities. How did you end up doing what you're doing now? Because it's actually drawing on so many different skill sets from a change management perspective to obviously that deep tech understanding, process engineering and people.
I want to call myself vintage. I've been in the industry for 25 years, I think now, which is a very long time. So I've worked in the licensee space. I've worked in the funds management space. I've worked in advice firms. And obviously most recently I've worked in technology. When I say most recently, it's the past 13 years has been in tech specifically. So I think again, many of your listeners who have been around for as long as I have, we've been through a lot of that change. So, we've been through a lot of reform. FSR back in 99, I want to say FSR came in, and then obviously the QAR stuff that's happening. We've been through a Royal Commission. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened. And I think, working close to advisors, there's just been a lot of fatigue out there and understandably so. So I do feel that empathy with all of the stuff that's happened across those years. And I think, from a technology perspective, we get to obviously deep dive into processes and how they're using technology. And there's just been layer upon layer of process change and red tape and everything that they've had to accommodate in the day-to-day. So, I feel for advisors that have had to go through that long journey of change and still continuing to go through that change as well.
As you're probably aware, we've been running our advice tech research report for 6 years, I think going on 7 years now. And the differences in the industry and what people are thinking about and what they're doing has changed dramatically over that period. You mentioned that you've been doing this for 25 years. How have the conversations changed over that period? And what were you actually consulting on 25 years ago? Was it whether or not to move from Excel to platform, or what were the typical conversations from then to today?
I started my career working in financial services, working for RI Advice. So I went straight into licensee land. So back then we were doing cars on, I think they were blue bits of paper, blue lined paper, and the copies were on yellow paper. So there was really no technology involved in that process. Obviously Words and Excel really was it back in those days. It was really more about the process, I guess, back in those days. I had marketing roles, so really not really overly technology specific or process specific back then. Obviously over time, as technology has become more prominent in our industry, and we've had a lot of technology sort of grow and develop and come into the country from other countries, industries, the conversations are obviously shifting to here's my login and this is some training and support to, how do I actually meaningfully adopt and adapt this change into my firm, which, I think anyone who's been through technology change knows that it's pretty complicated. And again, the technology is probably the easy bit. Choosing the technology is the easy bit. It's actually implementing that change in a meaningful way that's the tricky thing. And people are complex, and managing that change, as we just mentioned earlier, does require that empathy to kind of get it happening in a meaningful way. We've got to sort of listen to those back and middle officers and get everybody on the journey. So yeah, it's a very different conversation.
Interestingly, I think even over the last maybe 5 to 10 years, you would assume that the amount of technology and the capability of technology would actually simplify things, but in many ways it's actually complicated it because there's so many different ways that you can achieve almost the same outcome or goal. The industry's also been through pretty significant change, and you touched on a number of the items before, but one of the big ones was that restructuring of the industry. So we saw a big shift from sort of institutionally aligned groups to independent, which for the first time, certainly in my career, gave them the flexibility to start to think about their service proposition, how they design processes, technology they used. Is that really where you saw the conversations change and the reasons for people wanting to talk to you sort of splinter?
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly, you're bang on. It has splintered off into those discussions, and the industry is manoeuvring itself, or has manoeuvred itself away from that institutional vertical integration type arrangement. So yeah, I think as advice firms do split away, they're separating from the hugs and the arms of the licensees or those institutions, and they're having to do it on their own and realizing that, all of a sudden they've got to think about all of these things that for the most part the licensee might have been handling for them. Compliance, tech, obviously a big one. And I think from a technology perspective, advisors have had to really, if they've gone and started their own firms, have had to absorb that cost of technology. And I think that's been a big driver of these conversations as well. We sort of see it as an operational expenditure, which is fair enough. It's very expensive, and we're still getting emails every 12 months saying our costs have gone up 10% for our technologies. And I don't think that that's going to go away anytime soon. And in fact, I think you're going to be getting more of those emails, and the increases are probably going to be over 10%. So that's a story for conversation for another day. But yeah, I think it's really interesting to try and help them have those conversations, to look at technology, not necessarily operational expenditure, which of course it is, but also that it's an investment, because as soon as you do start investing in technology and adopting it meaningfully, so I don't mean just grabbing the next shiny new toy that you see, really thinking about it and really sort of unpacking your processes, start from that area rather than, the other way around with getting the technology first, then I think, you can really, and we certainly see this with our clients over a period of time, we do see that positive ROI from investment in technology. We never see anything go backwards. It's always more efficiencies, happier team members, all these things that don't necessarily have a value on the P&L.
When you first start chatting to practices, have they engaged you because they see technology as a necessary evil, as a threat, or as an opportunity? I mean, obviously, what you've just said is all around the upside and the opportunity to drive better margins, happier clients, better client experience. But where does the conversation sort of tend to start? And is it actually advice firms realizing if they don't do something now that they're going to get left behind pretty quickly?
Yeah, good question. So our clients come to us for a variety of reasons, but I guess the biggest reasons are they're going through an acquisition, they're merging with another firm. That's probably one of the biggest reasons. The other reason is they may have gone through technology change in the past and it hasn't worked well. So, they've had frustrated team members in the back and middle offices again that are starting to see those inefficiencies come through. So, they bring us in and we have those conversations around what did you do and why did you go through that change and what sort of drove that change to let's sort of try and do this in a more meaningful and strategic way. So quite often we sort of laugh at sometimes when we're delivering our technology reviews back to clients, they are sometimes expecting a shiny brand new tech stack that's going to have lots of AI and shiny things that are going to fix all their problems, but quite often it's pretty boring. Sort of stripping back, having a look at those processes, looking to what you've got and taking the path of least resistance potentially, and then looking at those cool, more automated tools like AI and that sort of thing.
The start of your process is really around that tech health, tech review. What does that encompass? Is it things you talked about, or is it going a lot deeper and do you include interviews, customer interviews? How do you actually go about it?
Yeah, so we run a pretty comprehensive discovery process with our clients. And what we want to do is make sure we not only get in front of the business owners and the financial advisors, we also really want to talk to as many people as we can in isolation, have separate conversations with those people, because that's how we sort of extract what's really happening in the business and get those pain points out on the table. And quite often we find especially in the back and middle offices, if they haven't had technology to support them in a meaningful way, they might be using external tools like an Asana or a Grande. Excel spreadsheets are obviously probably the most heavily used additional piece of tech, as you would know. So we have those conversations with as many people as we can, unpack all of those inefficiencies, and then we come up with a plan for them to attack those inefficiencies. We have a framework, and we just simply look at the advice journey and those jobs to be done in the advice journey and who's involved in those particular steps, and come up with a plan that we feel is going to help them achieve those efficiencies.
So presumably there is a core stack that you end up rolling out to a lot of these firms, recognising that they're all slightly different. What are some of the big trends that you're seeing? Are you continuing to see planning software and CRM being separated, for example? What are some of the bigger thematics?
Yeah, we're sort of finding that the traditional CRMs that we have, they're really great at producing advice. There's really nothing out there that can produce advice and do the research and the modelling as well as those end-to-end advice tools that we know. So I'm talking here Xplan, AdviceLogic, Midwinter. But what we're maybe seeing there is that those tools are just being used purely for the advice production piece. So we just see the paraplanners, for example, or the associates in those particular tools. And then we keep the advisors out of that area and have a more simplified tool in place for workflow and day-to-day and revenue management and reporting and all of those sort of things. And obviously client engagement is a big thing here. And we always see, and again, I know you will relate to this, and our research tells us 70% of advice firms are still doing things like emailing sensitive documents to their clients. So we'll sort of start to look at client portals or ways to securely share documents with clients, but also support that onboarding process as well. So if you look at a client portal, it's not just a client portal for your clients. It's going to support more efficient onboarding for your team members. So helping that fact find process through to advice, secure document sharing, obviously I've said, but also that, in between review periods, communicating with your clients, speeding up implementation, all those, key bottlenecks that we find in advice firms that are pretty standard, I think, those bottlenecks across advisors.
One of the big complaints, or one of the problems that get cited often, is just the amount of regulation and the compliance overlay on everything. Is that just an excuse, or can it be solved for using technology?
Honestly, I think we have created a million ways to do the same thing. So if you look at sort of what all advice firms do in terms of the advice journey, they're all onboarding clients. They're all doing discovery, so fact-finding and risk profiling with their clients for the most part. Then they're producing the advice, so they're researching, producing advice. Then they're implementing the advice, and then they're reviewing the advice. That's pretty much it, right? And on repeat, obviously, if their client's in a review cycle. I think we've just really overcomplicated a reasonably simplified process. So I think my advice to advisors is to just strip back what you can. The technology broadly does what it says it's going to do, but I think too often we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, or really overthinking. I get that we have the underlying nuances in the tasks that happen under those headline workflows, and that's fine. That all sort of aligns with your client value proposition and all of those sort of things, and that's okay. I just feel like we've really overcomplicated a process, and we do sometimes blame that on the regulatory environment. I think we can probably do a little bit of work as advisors and advice firms to just sort of simplify things and take a step back, unpack it all and rebuild it into something that's a little bit more simplified, which means that you're going to be able to give your clients a better experience, right? Because you're going to have more time to do that.
Is it fair to say that that's also been the case for software in that case?
Yeah, I think the software has, where they have tried to accommodate those regulatory changes. So FDS is obviously a big one there. So whenever regulatory change flows through, the technology providers, try and accommodate that. And, there's more than anybody constantly developing technology and trying to tack on things to technology. It takes a lot of time, costs a lot of money, sucks a lot of resources. Sure, we can do that, but don't expect your costs to go down. If we want the technologies to consistently be sort of shifting the way, rebuilding themselves, I think, with respect to what's happening in the regulatory environment.
A lot of the work that we've done suggests that over many years now, the average cost per seat from a technology perspective is about $10,000, which is that accumulation of just multiple software solutions that in many cases have overlapping features and do similar things. When you get to that sort of end state, what are you trying to compress that dollar amount to? Do you think it can be done for $5,000, $6,000, or is $10,000 an appropriate level but just done smarter?
Yeah, I think we come at it from a different angle. So when we have advisors say to us, come to us and say they want to save money on their technology, we sort of take a step back and say, okay, what are you doing right now? And this happens in the discovery sessions. And the way that they're running their businesses and the inefficiencies that they have and the human cost that is going into doing all these things inefficiently. A good example is, a lot of advisors will send off a PDF fact find, for example. The client will fill that in. It'll get sent back, has to be scanned in. Someone's got to data enter that. That whole process takes a lot of time, and we can just really use an online fact finding tool or a client portal to help take the pressure off that particular part of the process. That's not overly exciting or sexy, but it can really support and hit a really big pain point in an advice firm. So I'm not an advocate for finding technology that's going to be cheaper necessarily. I think, my personal opinion, that's not the right way to look at it. It's more, where's this technology going to help our efficiencies? Because that's where you start to see the return on investment with those, your users and your team members starting to do more value-added things in the firm and not spending their time on highly manual tasks that can be a little bit automated.
Imagine a world where wealth technology is simplified. NetWealth is continually investing in new tools and platform features to optimize your staff productivity and to give you and your clients the best user experience. With our managed accounts functionality, bring new efficiency and scale to your investment operations. A world of technology awaits. Discover it at netwealth.com.au/woo.
Without getting down into the weeds and individual technologies, which I'm very tempted to do, you just mentioned a scenario whereby the obvious outcome is to digitize the solution, so the fact find. But what we see and hear every day is that that's great for a cohort of clients, but not everyone necessarily is going to want to go download a mobile app and then fill out that fact find, load documents via a digital method, and therefore paper is in fact the best way to do it. Have you seen firms starting to experiment or use some of the new Microsoft 365 capability where you can effectively just load up a photo or a scan of a document and it pre-fills a lot of the systems?
Yeah, we do. And I think you don't have to have a full-blown client portal. You don't need to do that. You can just use forms, something like that makes the experience a lot better for the client, and it just gives you a little bit more automation in the way that you're doing things. Now, that doesn't necessarily, depending on what technology you're using, feed in to the tech that you're using, but, you are starting to reduce some friction in there. So I think if we sort of look at these tools, they're not, even if half your clients used a client portal for part of the fact find, and even if they only did 20% of that piece of the project, you're still going to see, a heavy reduction in time across all of your clients, across all of your team members over a period of time. So I think, again, we need to just think of this as, we're not just saying everybody should use a client portal and everybody should get their clients to do the fact find. Totally get that that's not a reality, particularly with ultra high net worth clients and all that sort of stuff. Again, as you would know, wholesale advisors don't really want to go down that road and get their clients to be filling in fact finds and things like that. That's okay. But I think if we can kind of start to strip back and just attack incrementally these heavy, laborious jobs, then we're going to make some headway.
I'd probably categorize myself as an early adopter when it comes to new technologies. And yet with the constant transformation, both in my personal life and also work life, I am finding that tech fatigue is starting to kick in some instances where the thought of having to learn a new system or a new process or a new way of doing something actually becomes quite daunting. I imagine for a lot of people it becomes very daunting. So coming back to that people conversation or aspect, once you've picked your preferred tech stack with the advisor principal or general manager, what's the next step as far as taking the staff along for that journey and embedding the new way of doing things into how they work?
Yeah, good question. You're so right. I feel the same too. And especially with AI, right? So many AI tools. There's some really great content out on LinkedIn about how to use AI effectively. People are running awesome workshops. It's excellent. But again, to your point, it's too much. Sometimes it's overwhelming, right? So, but the way that we run it is, once we've come up with a technology stack and the blueprint that everybody agrees to, we then present that back to the team so that they know that we've heard them and they can see what's going to come down the pipe. Now, at that point in time, everyone gets super excited because their lives are going to change and they don't always hear what we're saying with the length of time it's going to take. But we take a really baby-stepped approach to it. So if we've got a whole advice journey to accommodate, we might just start with the paraplanners, for example, and just sort out that advice issue that they've got going on because they may have a huge backlog, for example. So we'll just put through a priority list and we manage it like any other project. So we have strict project management protocols in place. But once we've delivered that that particular bit of the change, we'll then not just train as in this is how you do things, we'll sort of bring them on the journey again. This is why we're doing it. This is how it's going to help you. It's going to be frustrating. You're going to hate us at some point in this journey, but just keep at it because you're going to need to see that benefit into the future. And this is a long journey, right? This isn't going to, your problems are not going to be solved by selecting technology, getting your logins. It's not going to solve your problems unless you've actually gone through that unpacking and the unpeeling of the onion and brought everybody along the way.
The next area that I'd love to chat about, and I've got a vested interest, is data and how you ensure that your data is synced, governed, managed effectively, particularly where you've got multiple tech systems sitting in a firm and different solutions being used by different personas. How are you seeing firms think about data, the value of data, and also just the ongoing management of it?
Great question. I think it's not on the radar for a lot of advice firms in terms of data sovereignty. So I think that, when we're certainly looking at technologies, and because we have so many new technologies in front of us, we make sure, and we would encourage all advisors to run, a set of due diligence. Our research tells us that advisors typically don't run due diligence or do RFPs for the technology providers. You should be doing that, and you should be asking things like, where is your data stored? Are they ISO certified? All of those sort of key components that you would expect of a technology provider. Also, their, financial stability and all that sort of thing, I think needs to be unpacked as well as part of your due diligence. So yeah, I think data is a really big one. And the truth of the matter is there's probably not a lot of options that we have here in Australia that are safe, secure, and tick all of those boxes from a due diligence perspective. So I think it's really important, again, to really consider how you want that data to look. Data silos are okay, but if you've got data siloed in, 7 or 8 different systems, you've got a problem on your hands. So A, you're not really going to know what's going on in your business without a lot of manual work to try and gather that information. But also, what's the risk there? Who's got access to those Excel spreadsheets, and where are they going? Are they being emailed back and forth? Do we even know? I would suggest a lot of advisors aren't fully aware of how their data is being handled.
Are you seeing the better firms really starting to focus on that and to leverage their data?
Yeah, definitely. And we would say in your language, man, that the stars, I think, are really thinking about that data, making sure it's consolidated as much as they can. And if it's not consolidated in something like a CRM, then they're using those tools like an Azure/Power BI to get those insights into their business. So again, we wouldn't recommend overcomplicating things, but I think the Zeppos of the world, all of those data integration tools are super important to consider when it comes to managing your overall tech stack, especially if you are a business that has small IFA, but you do have businesses sitting under that. You want to know what's going on, right, from a data perspective and where your clients are at in the journey, and a specialized data aggregation tool is going to help you do that.
Probably a good segue into AI. Is this something that you're getting excited about? Have you seen some failures, and what are the areas that you think it's going to add the most value?
Oh, I had to open this can of worms.
It was always going to happen.
Right. So, actually, one of my colleagues would probably say that I'm a bit conservative on AI, and the reason that I am, I think, again, in advice, we got really excited about AI. So, when it first came out a couple of years ago, we all started talking about it. It was going to solve all of our problems. It was going to reduce SOAs down to 2 minutes. It was going to do all these amazing things. So those promises are fabulous, but, we're 2 years down the track, and I don't think we've seen a lot of that happen. And I think that the reason is that, again, we haven't really strategically thought about where it fits, or we haven't really understood what those pain points are in our advice business and across that advice journey. We haven't really talked to our back offices and found out their take on things. So until we do that, I'm not sure that AI is going to be overly effective, and it just turns into a personal productivity tool, which, by the way, I use AI quite a bit in my job. I think it's wonderful. But I think, in terms of how it fits into that advice journey, and where you can, the practical application across a team of people in an advice firm, obviously file noting makes the biggest sense there. That's absolutely a bottleneck. And I think we've seen a lot of advice firms see the benefits of recording meetings, getting your file note transcripted really well, getting that follow-up with your client done really quickly, and then passing that on into advice. That is a no-brainer. And I think everybody should, at least at a minimum, have Copilot switched on and be recording all their Teams meetings, in my humble opinion. But I think for all of the other tools that are out there, I think we just need to wait and see. We need to test their safety and their viability. Again, we're working with highly sensitive data. We want to make sure that we're really handling that very well when it comes to using these AI tools. We don't want to be putting sensitive information into ChatGPT and personal identifiers and all that sort of thing. I'm not sure that we're not doing that right now. So before the train leaves, I think we probably just need to just take a bit of a step, just think really carefully about where this fits. Research and strategy, and I think kicking the ball around on those sort of things, marketing, get ChatGPT to help you with your LinkedIn posts and all that sort of stuff. I think that's really handy for those sort of things. So I love AI, use it personally myself, but I think from an advice firm perspective and looking at it, holistically about where it can fit, I think we just need to be careful. But I would say everybody should be recording their Teams meetings and getting their file notes done. You're going to see a significant uplift in efficiency just from doing that.
Indeed. I did a interesting podcast 2 or 3 episodes ago where it was a well-known advice coach and technologist from America talking about the ability to use AI avatars to really multiply the advisor through a personalization of comms and sort of almost to some extent the advice delivery. Have you seen any of that in Australia yet?
Yes, I have. But again, I guess my take on that would be, I think it is great if you want to service your clients en masse and service the consumers that need advice. And, we know we've got an advice problem here. Then I think bringing that in for the simple cases, could potentially make sense. On the flip side, though, how are you going to deliver that message to your clients? Are your clients going to be happy that, they're getting their advice from an AI avatar? I don't know. And again, Matt, when we think about wholesale advisors and wholesale clients, there's no way that's ever going to happen, right, with those guys. They're so high touch with their clients. So yeah, look, I think their potential is exciting and the future is exciting with AI. I think it's going to do some amazing things. I'm not denying that at all, but I think we just need to take a step back. There's probably ways that you can automate using your existing systems that you've already got. Now, do that first, then use the AI jazz hands on top of that to just enhance those efficiencies would be my advice at the moment. But I'm not an oracle, so.
Interesting comment that you just made there about wholesale advisors, and again, maybe an observation that the smaller practices, the younger practices, and those looking after smaller clients tend to be more technologically advanced than sort of your private client wholesale high net worth advisors, potentially because there's not as much pressure on their margins. But what are you seeing in the industry? Does that sort of ring true?
Yeah, I love seeing younger advisors coming through. I was at an event the other day and I was sitting at a table and they're all millennial advisors, and they are obviously, they were born into technology. So they just expect, technology to work. They expect that they're going to give these clients these great experience with technology. Their take and view on tech, it was really good. But surprisingly, they were very conservative on AI. They were just using it for things like file notes and that sort of thing. They weren't sort of overly ambitious with bringing AI into their business and making that kind of a key strategy that they were going to work towards over the next couple of years. It was more about the client experience they were really caring about and how they were interacting with their clients, which was interesting. But yeah, I love seeing that those younger advisors come through and the older advisors with the experience and, scars and the bruises and all of the things that they've had mentoring those advisors. It's really great to see.
The other day, you may have seen a comment in, I think it was Professional Planner from Neil Younger talking about their new strategy, Road to 200, which I think is a really good way to encapsulate what us and I know many others in the industry are actually trying to achieve, which is how do we help firms and advisors go from servicing 100 clients today to 200 clients in 2 to 3 years. Do you think that's a reality, and is technology the key there, or is it going to be a real combination of re-engineering processes, the technology and the type of advice that we're delivering?
I think absolutely technology is going to be the enabler of scaling your business and getting out to more clients. So the question there is, do you actually want to service more clients? Is that an intention for advisors? Obviously, the other way to do that is to grow the advisors that we have in our industry, which is, a conundrum that we have right now. That makes sense to sort of bring new advisors into your teams. It helps with things like succession planning if you're planning to exit over a period of time. But absolutely, technology is going to be the enabler of that. You're going to have to be really efficient in the way that you onboard your clients. Those big bottlenecks with advice production and advice delivery, you're going to have to have a way to do that in a really efficient way. Sometimes we see, our clients when they first come to us, our clients being advisors, they're up to a week to produce a statement of advice. That has to be stripped right back. And, the technology that we have at the moment can currently do that as long as it's configured appropriately and adopted really well. So I'm obviously going to say technology is where it's at, but it's certainly going to help you with those bottlenecks. And again, things like client portals, implementation is another, and you'll know this too with your reports. Implementation is such a long process, can take, our research tells us, up to 60 days to implement certain pieces of advice. So, we need to strip that back as well. And a lot of the time the client is the problem there. They're not sending forms back and they're not signing things on time. So we need to find ways to get them engaged quickly to move that process along.
So where there is an intention, do you think 200 is realistic, or do you think it's going to settle at somewhere around the 160, 170 mark?
I'm going to go with 180. I think probably because that's what our clients, again, what our advisors, that's their sort of aim, is around that 180 mark. They don't sort of want to go too far beyond that. So, that in itself is something, a discussion to be had. Why don't we want to have more clients? That could be a variety of reasons. They might, value lifestyle and just want to, that's a comfortable number for them to service, and that's fine as well. But I think anybody who's looking to grow and sell into the future, it's certainly a conversation that they need to be having and thinking about how they're going to tactically attack that.
Now, I'm conscious we're getting close to time. A little bit about you. Throughout this conversation, one might walk away thinking you're quite risk adverse, but you used to go parachuting every weekend.
I did. Back for a long time ago. I would never do it now. One of my daughters asked if she could go skydiving the other day, and I said, no way. No, I did. 72 skydives. It used to be my weekend sport.
Amazing.
Long time ago. Yeah.
But before
I had one near-death experience. Yeah, it was a good rush.
Very sensible. And I think you're also an avid podcast listener, as well as having your own podcast. What are some of the ones that you're enjoying at the moment?
I love Darknet Diaries. Have you heard of that one?
I haven't. I was just reading about it before, though. It looks fantastic.
Yeah, highly recommend it. It's hosted by a guy called Jack Rhysider, and nobody knows who he is, but it's a lot of the guests on there are hackers or they're social engineers. So that social engineering thing is something that really interests me, particularly in financial advice, because we're pretty bad, I think, at cybersecurity. We're getting better at it, but, we're still emailing sensitive documents, all that sort of thing. So social engineering is when, we could have all the right systems in place with our IT infrastructure, but social engineers are humans that manipulate their ways into your systems. And I find it really fascinating and just interesting, things that we need to be aware of, I think, in our industry, because we hold the most sensitive of client data. We're sort of hot targets, I reckon, for social engineers to be trying to attack us that way.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, we do see a lot of it. I would definitely add that one to my list. Final question. We've gone through a lot in a relatively short period of time. For people wanting to find out more about Finura, but also for the work that you're doing, what's the best way to get in touch or to read more?
Yes, thank you. So we have a podcast called The Wealth Tech Insider. We try and put some good info out there to help advice firms with the day-to-day stuff that we find on our projects. You can find us at www.finuragroup.com. We also have a technology health check on our website. It's free. Any advisors can go and complete that. It's pretty comprehensive and gives you a take on how you're traveling with all of the areas of advice and where you're using technology, with some helpful tips in there.
Fantastic. It's been a great chat. Thanks for sharing, and look forward to catching up or listening to you at the next conference.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me, Matt.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Between Meetings. For more episodes and to subscribe to our series, visit the NetWealth website, iTunes, Spotify, or your favourite listening service. And if you want to contact me or engage or discuss any of the topics raised, please find me on LinkedIn or Twitter, or send me a private message. We hope you can tune into the next episode.